It's now my pleasure, in recognition of our 20th anniversary, to introduce you to Diane Wittenberg. Diane is a member and former chair of the California State Park Commission. Most importantly, from our perspective, she was the founding president of the California Climate Action Registry and our first president for the Climate Action Reserve. She's co-authored California Goes Green, a roadmap to climate leadership, and she served as the vice president of Southern California Edison and Edison International. Without further ado, Diane Wittenberg, our first president.
Well, good morning, everyone. I think I'm going to provide some local color because I'm more cheerful about the future than Craig seems to be. So as you can tell from that background about the California Registry, then the Climate Registry and the Reserve, I'm sort of old. So my perspective is when I started in climate I would say it would be in the 80s, when you told people what your job was, 100% of people said, "You don't really believe in climate change, do you?" So if you take that as no one says that to you now, or very few people, we have come a long way, although to Craig's point, we haven't quite solved it. So let me just give you some short history to kind of do my job of reflecting where we were in the first conference 20 years ago to today. So the California Climate Registry was created in 2000 by the California legislature. I know nonprofits are not usually made by legislation, but this is California. What the state wanted was inventory reporting protocols that could establish reliable baseline emissions guidance, because they knew that sometime in the future they were going to regulate, and they wanted strong baseline numbers to make sense of as they moved forward. So those first greenhouse gas reporting protocols were released in 2002, and we immediately started working on offset protocols. So by 2007, two things happened. Other states and provinces in Canada and Mexico said, "We'd like to be part of the registry." It's sort of a government supporting kind of organization. So we moved from the California Climate Action Registry to the Climate Registry that included North America. At the same time, we saw how important the offset protocol business and activity was, and it was bigger than just being part of the Climate Registry, so we stood up the Climate Action Reserve as a separate nonprofit, and it's taken off from there and been very successful. But that's how those things came together. But in that first conference in 2003, it was at the Hyatt. It took me quite a bit of memory searching to remember all this. It was at the Hyatt Regency in San Francisco. Was anybody in this audience at that conference? One, two. Please come and talk to me afterwards. Who else? Anybody else? Oh, yeah, Andrea. Oh, good. Yeah. And I think a few other people, too, I know who are speaking. And some of the people who spoke at that conference are speaking at this conference. So that continuity of knowledge, a growing sophistication is all here and needs to be celebrated, I think. When our first conference, we invited every member, every sponsor, every legislator, every regulator, our mothers, and our friends, and we had 150 people there. And Craig, you're doing a lot better than we did that first year. Congratulations. But more seriously, just one little point. This logo, we had this same logo more or less at the first conference and everyone in between. So now you have a little cocktail conversation. The two differences. We called it, for some reason, Navigating the American Carbon World. And somewhere in the last 20 years it changed to North American Carbon World. But the other thing is the 20, we had that same type logo, for one. And the only difference is the designer had made the arrows point upward. And the people at the first conference said, "I thought you were about reducing carbon, so why are those arrows pointing up?" So we immediately reversed them, and I'm glad to see that they've remained downward pointing. But in terms of content of that first registry conference, we had an updated version of the general reporting protocol, and then our forestry and power offset protocols, we had the drafts out for comment. So that was in 2003. We had big industry groups at the conference itself doing the work on the compatibility for our oil and gas protocols and our cement protocols, and we knew we were going to do methane recovery next. So that was a good start for the dozens and dozens of protocols that are out there now. This organization really was, I think, seminal in helping kick that off. We also, and I hand this all off to you to continue this work, we were on a working group to help the SEC draft climate rules for reporting. That hasn't moved along. That hasn't even moved as fast as the COP stuff. So I hope it moves forward this year. And our biggest problem that we discussed was how could we keep the privacy of companies' data for their reporting their inventories, and at the same time aggregate data so the public could see and learn something about emissions, amounts, numbers, reductions. And it was hard to do, and I can remember having a conversation with Chevron. This shows how back in the dark ages we were. And I said, I don't understand why your emissions are so different every year. I mean, you're an oil company. And they explained to me, sort of in words of one syllable, how if you do make more aviation fuel, kerosene, 1 year, and if you make more refined fuels for cars another year, that affects your emissions, and those are marketing secrets. And so I learned something then. So you can see we were really at the beginning of the sophistication level that you're at now. But the values were very much the same, and this is my last word here, that provides a through point for all the conferences for 20 years. And the reserve is the one having these North American Carbon World Conferences. We knew we wanted to be an important voice in standard setting, that was key to our identity and existence. We had to be accountable and require accountability because the state was on our rear ends about that. And we insisted on transparency. So integrity was key. And I'm really happy to be here today, to be invited to take a little trip down memory lane like that, because I'm proud that the Climate Action Reserve continues to reflect those same values that we had 20 years ago. And thank you, Craig, and your whole organization. So that's a little background for where you are today. And my next task is to introduce our next speaker, who is Benoit Charette, the Minister of the Environment and the Fight Against Climate Change for the province of Quebec. So, Benoit, are you here to speak? There you are. I didn't see you.
Mr. President.
Thank you.